The air in Tenochtitlan is thick with the smell of burning copal incense and dread. It is June 30th, 1520. The once mighty ceremonial plaza, the heart of an empire, is now a scene of unspeakable horror. The rhythmic, haunting beat of the huhuital drum has been swallowed by screams. Not the screams of sacrificial captives, but of the Aztec people themselves, warriors, priests, women, children, falling under the swords of their own invited guests. Montezuma II, the Huitlatoani, the great speaker, emperor of the Aztecs, stands on a stone balcony of his palace. He is a prisoner in his own home. Below him, a massacre unfolds. Conquistadors in steel, their faces grimed with sweat and blood, drive their Tlaxcalan allies forward in a frenzy of slaughter. The canals, once shimmering blue arteries of the city, run crimson. The sound is a cacophony, the clash of Spanish steel against obsidian-tipped macuahuital swords, the guttural war cries of the Tlaxcalans, the wet thud of blades finding flesh, and the rising, unified wail of a betrayed populace. Montezuma's robes are fine cotton and brilliant Quetzal feathers, but they hang on him like a shroud. His face, once an impassive mask of divine authority, is etched with a profound, terrifying emptiness. He is caught between two worlds. He believed the strangers were gods, or at least their emissaries. He showered them with gold, housed them in his father's palace, and obeyed their whims. Now, he hears his people's cries change from pain to rage. A new chant rises, cutting through the chaos. It is no longer a plea to the gods. It is a curse directed at him. Muera el tirano. Death to the tyrant. The Spanish cry mixes with the Nahuatl roar from the streets, Cieza Mopanoli, in Toltec Sizen. Let the stranger be sacrificed. But the most damning words are simply, Montezuma. His name, once sacred, is now spat like a poison. A rock arcs from the furious crowd. Then another. They are not large, but they are thrown with the force of utter betrayal. A stone strikes Montezuma's temple. He staggers, a thin trickle of blood cutting through the dark paint on his skin. His guards move to pull him inside, but he shrugs them off. He looks out one last time at his empire unraveling in fire and blood. The divine aura that held 1 million people in thrash has utterly evaporated. In its place is only the cold, sinking realization of a terrible, irreversible mistake. The fall of Emperor Montezuma II is not a single event. It is a slow, psychological unraveling that ends here, on this balcony, as his world collapses around him. And it began not with a war, but with an omen. Years earlier, the omens began. Priests brought troubling reports to Montezuma's throne room. A column of fire appeared in the eastern sky every midnight for a year, bathing the heavens in an unnatural, bloody light. Then, the temple of Huitzilopochtli, the god of sun and war, burst into flames without cause. Water itself refused to quench it. Fishermen netted a strange, ash-colored bird with a mirror in its head. When Montezuma looked into it, he saw unfamiliar stars and armored men riding mythical, giant deer. The air grew heavy with a collective anxiety. The empire was rich, powerful, expansive, and deeply afraid. The cosmic balance was shifting. For Montezuma, a man of intense piety and ritual, these were not mere superstitions. They were direct communications from the gods. The Aztec worldview was cyclical, prophesying the return of the feathered serpent god, Quetzalcoatl, from the east. The god was light-skinned, bearded, and would reclaim his kingdom. When word reached Tenochtitlan of floating mountains off the Yucatan coast, and bearded men in strange metal skins riding deer that were not deer, Montezuma's fate was psychologically sealed. The seeds of conquest were not sown by Spanish steel alone, but in the fertile ground of Aztec prophecy. Cut to the coast of Veracruz, April 1519. Hernán Cortés, a man of desperate ambition and bankrupt finances, steps onto the sand. He smells the salt air, the dense jungle rot, the unknown. His 550 men are not a grand army. They are adventurers, fugitives, and soldiers of fortune. They hear the distant roar of unseen beasts, see temples atop distant pyramids. They are terrified. But Cortés does something radical and ruthless. He burns his ships. There is no retreat, only forward, into the heart of a mighty empire, with no guarantee of survival. The first emissaries from Montezuma arrive. They bring breathtaking gifts: a golden sun disk as large as a cartwheel, a silver moon of equal size, headdresses of quetzal feathers, finely worked jade. They are meant to appease the possible gods, to send them away rich. To Cortés and his men, these objects are a different kind of omen, proof of unimaginable wealth. The scent of gold overwhelms the scent of danger. The Spanish polish their armor, charge their muskets, and prepare their greatest weapon, the horse, an animal never before seen in Mesoamerica, a creature of sheer, terrifying power. Inland begins. Cortés plays a brutal game of diplomacy and war. He learns of the deep-seated hatred that the subjugated states like the Tlaxcalans hold for the Aztec Empire. The Aztec Empire was built on a foundation of tribute and ritual war for captives. Resentment festered in every city that paid its quota of maize, cloth, and blood. Cortés, the outsider, becomes a catalyst for rebellion. He forges an alliance with the Tlaxcalans. His small band of Spaniards is now the tip of a spear held by thousands of indigenous warriors eager to see Tenochtitlan fall. The empire, for all its splendor, is a pressure cooker. Montezuma, isolated by his own divinity atop his pyramid palace, has no idea how close to rebellion his world truly is. In November 1519, the two worlds meet face to face. On the Grand Causeway leading into Tenochtitlan, a city of gleaming white temples and bustling canals more populous than any in Europe, Montezuma approaches. His litter is borne by nobles, his person shaded by a canopy of emeralds and fine feathers. The air is scented with flowers strewn in his path. Cortés, sweating in his steel, dismounts from his horse. The moment is surreal, tense, electric. Montezuma speaks, his words translated by the invaluable and enigmatic woman, Malinche. "My lord, you have reached your city. You have come to sit on your throne." He is literally welcoming Cortés as a returning god-king. Cortés, the pragmatist, reaches out to embrace him. The Aztec nobles recoil in horror. No one touches the Huey Tlatoani. The cultural chasm is vast, deep, and instantly apparent. Montezuma, trying to placate a divine force, invites the Spaniards into the very heart of his empire. He houses them in the palace of his late father, Axiacatl, adjacent to his own. It is a gesture of supreme hospitality and, as it will prove, a catastrophic error. For weeks, the Spaniards are treated as royal guests. They are shown the vast market of Tlatelolco, the immaculate temples, the awe-inspiring zoo. But Cortés is not a tourist. He is casing a kingdom. He notes the wealth, the social structure, the military strength, and he grows increasingly paranoid. The scent of flowers cannot mask the underlying tension. The Spaniards can feel the silent, watching eyes of 1,000,000 people. They hear the eerie, nightly thump of the sacrificial drum from the Great Temple, a constant reminder of a religion they find both alien and abhorrent. The breaking point comes during a tour of the temple complex. Cortés and his men witness the inner sanctum, the walls crusted black with ancient blood, the idols with eyes of obsidian. The smell is metallic, organic, foul. Bernal Diaz del Castillo, a soldier, would later write of the horror they felt. Cortés, in a move of staggering audacity, suggests to Montezuma that a Christian cross be placed alongside the idol of Huitzilopochtli. Montezuma's polite refusal is firm, his anger barely contained. The facade of divine courtesy begins to crack. Then, news arrives from the coast. A larger Spanish force has landed, sent by the governor of Cuba to arrest Cortés for insubordination. Cortés must act. In a breathtaking move, he takes Montezuma hostage in his own palace. Using a mixture of bravado and implied threat, he convinces the emperor to voluntarily move into the Spanish quarters. To the Aztecs outside, nothing seems amiss. Montezuma still appears on the balcony, still gives orders. But the truth is chilling. The emperor is now a puppet, his strings pulled by a desperate conquistador. The psychological conquest is complete. Montezuma, the semi-divine ruler of millions, is a prisoner, forced to swear allegiance to a foreign king and to hand over gold as tribute. The empire holds its breath, waiting for its god-king to act. But Montezuma, trapped by his own belief system, his paralysis in the face of supposed divinity, does nothing. The tension in the city becomes a taut, vibrating wire, ready to snap with the slightest touch. The snap comes during the festival of Tenochtitlan. The air, usually thick with the scent of roasting amaranth and the sound of flute and drum, is charged with a different energy. The Spanish, left in command by Cortés, who has rushed to the coast to deal with the rival force, are jumpy. Pedro de Alvarado, tenacious, or the son to the Aztecs for his blonde hair, is a man of violent impulse, not diplomacy. He has heard whispers, or believes he has, of a rebellion planned for the festival. He sees the thousands of Aztec nobility dancing in the main plaza, their bodies painted, their movements a sacred devotion to Tezcatlipoca, the god of destiny. He does not see a religious ceremony. He sees an army assembling. He gives the order. The Spanish soldiers, armored and heavily armed, block the temple exits. The drumming stops. For one breathless moment, there is only the rustle of feathered costumes and the confused murmur of the dancers. Then, with a guttural cry, the Spaniards fall upon them. They are not fighting warriors. They are slaughtering priests, nobles, the flower of Aztec society. Obsidian blades are useless against Toledo steel at close quarters. The plaza becomes a charnel house. The beautiful canal waters turn red as nobles leap in to escape, only to be cut down. The screams are not of battle, but of pure, unadulterated terror and betrayal. The massacre lasts for hours. When it is done, the Spanish retreat to their fortified palace, barricading the doors. The silence that falls over the sacred plaza is more horrifying than the noise. Word spreads through Tenochtitlan like a bloodstain. Grief curdles into a cold, unified rage. The people now know the truth. These are not gods. They are treacherous, murderous beasts. The city that was holding its breath now exhales a roar of fury. Montezuma's brother, Cuitlahuac, a man of action unbowed by theological doubt, is freed by the mob and takes command. The siege of the Spanish compound begins. When Cortés returns, victorious from the coast with his new recruits, he finds a city transformed. The causeways are broken. The bridges are drawn. The friendly faces are gone, replaced by a sea of hostile warriors. He fights his way back to the palace compound, his force now swollen but trapped. The mood inside the palace is one of grim desperation. The stench of fear mixes with the smell of unburied corpses from the Tenochtitlan massacre, hidden within the walls. They are surrounded by an entire, enraged populace. Cortés turns to his one remaining card, the prisoner emperor. He forces Montezuma, once more, onto the balcony. The emperor is a shadow of his former self. His regalia seems to weigh him down. Below, a vast crowd of his people, warriors, commoners, women, stare up at him. They fall silent, not out of respect, but out of stunned anticipation. What will their Huey Tlatoani say? Will he call for the annihilation of the invaders? Will he redeem himself? Montezuma speaks. His voice, once commanding empires, is weak. He pleads for peace. He asks his people to lay down their arms, to let the Spaniards leave in peace. He speaks of the power of the strangers, of the futility of resistance. He frames it as concern for his subjects' lives. The silence shatters. A lifetime of devotion, of absolute belief in his divinity, evaporates in that moment. The crowd sees not a god-king, but a collaborator, a weakling, a prisoner pleading for his captors. The dam of rage breaks. A warrior shouts an insult. A stone is thrown. Then a hail of rocks and arrows follows. The Spanish drag Montezuma back inside, bleeding from the head, his spirit broken. The last shred of his authority is gone, stripped away by the very people he was born to rule. He has become irrelevant. Days pass in a nightmare of constant assault. The Aztec warriors, led by Cuitlahuac, attack with a disciplined fury. They set fire to the palace walls. They rain arrows and stones from the rooftops. The Spanish attempts to use siege engines are met with relentless counterattacks. The air inside the compound is thick with smoke, the cries of the wounded, and the murmured prayers of men preparing for death. Cortés knows they cannot hold. They must break out or die. On the night of June 30th, 1520, under a cloak of rain and darkness, they make their move. The Noche Triste, the sad night. They plan to sneak out via the Tacuba Causeway, their armor muffled with cloth, their stolen gold and treasures loaded onto a makeshift bridge. But a woman fetching water sees them. She raises the alarm. Mexica, O Timiquihuizc. Mexica, come, they are escaping. What follows is not a battle, but a slaughter in the dark. The causeway becomes a death trap. Aztec war canoes swarm the lake, arrows and spears finding easy targets in the confined, panic column. Spanish soldiers, weighed down by stolen gold, drown in the deep canals. The wooden bridge snags, creating a fatal bottleneck. The screams of horses and men, the triumphant shouts of the Aztecs, the terrible sound of obsidian blades meeting flesh, it creates a hellish symphony. Cortés, in the thick of it, fights like a demon, losing fingers but not his life. He escapes, broken, leaving behind perhaps 2/3 of his Spanish force and thousands of his Tlaxcalan allies. The lake is choked with the dead. The Spanish later claimed the water was undrinkable for days from the blood and corpses. Back in the palace, or in a house along the causeway, the accounts differ, lies Montezuma. The man who ruled an empire is now a corpse. The Spanish claim he died from the head wound inflicted by his own people. The Aztec chroniclers state unequivocally that the Spaniards, seeing him as a useless liability, murdered him before they fled. A quiet, ignoble end for a figure of such immense power. His body, say the Nahua sources, was treated with contempt, cast out like rubbish. The news of his death spreads through the shattered city. There is no mourning, only a bitter vacuum of power and the cold, hard resolve of his brother, Cuitlahuac, to purge the land of the invaders forever. The Spaniards are broken, fleeing for their lives. The Aztecs have won a stunning, bloody victory. The empire, it seems, has been saved. But the true collapse is only just beginning. An invisible, far more deadly enemy has already taken up residence in Tenochtitlan's bustling streets and crowded canals, brought by the strangers and their animals. It is an enemy no warrior can fight, no prophecy predicted. As the Aztecs burn the Spanish corpses and purify their city, a subtle, insidious killer is already moving among them, waiting to deliver the final, devastating blow. The victory feast in Tenochtitlan was a somber affair. The sweet scent of pozole stew and chocolate could not mask the underlying odor of blood and smoke from the Noche Triste. The canals had been cleansed of Spanish corpses, but a psychic stain remained. Cuitlahuac, now the rightful Huey Tlatoani, was a warrior, not a philosopher king like his brother. He ordered the defenses strengthened, the arsenals replenished. The Spaniards were wounded, but not destroyed. They had retreated to Tlaxcala, the sworn enemy whose alliance with Cortés was the empire's most grievous wound. The air in the valleys around the Great Lake was thick with the anticipation of a final, decisive war. But in the crowded Calpula districts, along the bustling aqueducts and floating chinampas, a different war had already begun. It started with a headache, a fever that felt like fire in the bones. Then, the pustules, hideous, suppurating sores that covered the body, face, and eyes. The Aztecs called it Huey Cocaliztli, the Great Pestilence. The Spaniards knew it as viruela, smallpox. The disease moved with a silent, terrible swiftness. A person could be healthy at dawn and shuddering with fever by noon, dead in 3 days. There was no precedent for it in the Americas. The immune systems of the Aztec people were defenseless. The sickness did not discriminate. It felled the strong warrior and the infant in the cradle with equal, grotesque impartiality. The sounds of the city changed. The drums of ceremony were replaced by the constant, low wails of mourners. The smell of incense was overwhelmed by the stench of sickness and, soon, of mass graves. Quitlahuac, the hope of the empire, ruled for only 80 days. He did not die in glorious battle. He died in his bed, sweating and covered in pustules, powerless against an enemy he could not see. The Spanish, sheltered in Tlaxcala, suffered barely a sniffle. To the Aztecs, this was the ultimate proof of the stranger's malevolent, supernatural power. Their gods were clearly weaker, or had abandoned them utterly. The cosmic order was not just broken, it was inverted. Into this shattered world stepped Cuauhtémoc, the young, fierce nephew of Montezuma, the descending eagle. He was the empire's last chance, a leader of unyielding defiance. He rallied the remaining warriors, those not stricken or mourning. But the army he commanded was a ghost of its former self. The social order was crumbling. The tribute system ground to a halt as outlying provinces, also ravaged by disease, saw their chance to break free. Tenochtitlan, once a vibrant metropolis of over 200,000, was becoming a necropolis. Meanwhile, in Tlaxcala, Cortés was rebuilding. He was a gambler who had lost his stake, but not his nerve. He learned from the Noche Triste. He would not fight the city from within. He would strangle it. He directed the construction of 13 brigantines, small, maneuverable warships, to be built in secret, piece by piece, and carried over the mountains. He would control the lake. He forged new alliances with other disgruntled city-states, exploiting the fractures the Aztec Empire had long papered over with tribute. His new army was a mosaic of Spanish steel and indigenous vengeance, 1,000 strong. They marched back to the Valley of Mexico not as stealthy guests, but as an engine of annihilation. In May 1521, the final siege began. Cortés's strategy was methodical and brutal. The brigantines, launched onto the lake, destroyed the Aztec canoe fleets and cut off the city's food and water supply from its chinampas. The Spanish and their allies then began a slow, block-by-block advance down the causeways, filling in the canals as they went, turning the watery landscape into a ruin of mud and rubble. Tenochtitlan was being systematically dismantled. Cuauhtémoc and his warriors fought with a desperate, tragic heroism. They adapted, building barricades, digging pitfalls, launching nighttime raids. They captured Spanish soldiers, dragging them to the summit of the Templo Mayor for sacrifice. The Spaniards in the attacking forces could hear the distant, haunting sound of their comrades' conch shell trumpets from the summit, followed by an eerie silence. It was psychological warfare of the most profound kind. But for every Spaniard captured, 100 Aztecs fell to musket fire, cannon shot, or the relentless swords of the Tlaxcalans. The city was starving. The wells produced brackish water. The streets were littered with the bodies of plague victims, left unburied. The once gleaming white stucco of the temples was blackened by fire and blood. Cortés, in a moment of grim pragmatism, repeatedly offered terms. Cuauhtémoc's answer was always the same: defiance. The Aztecs would rather eat worms and drink lake water than surrender. The siege ground on for months, a grueling, ugly war of attrition. The Spanish advance was a tidal wave of destruction, but the Aztec resistance was a bedrock of pride, wearing itself down to the last grain of sand. Finally, in August, the end came. The Spanish forces pushed into the last stronghold of Tlatelolco, the Twin City. The great marketplace, once a wonder of the world, was now a bombarded ruin. Cuauhtémoc, in a final attempt to escape and continue the fight, was captured trying to flee across the lake in a canoe. He was brought before Cortés. The young emperor, in a gesture of ultimate dignity, placed his hand on the conquistador's dagger and said, "I have done what I am obliged to do in defense of my city. Now take this dagger and kill me." Cortés did not kill him. Not then. The conqueror needed the symbol of surrender. The fighting, which had raged for 93 days, sputtered and died. An unnatural, heavy silence fell over the lake. The only sounds were the crackle of fires, the moans of the wounded, and the buzzing of flies over the countless dead. The Spaniards and their allies moved through the corpses like ghosts, the stench of death so profound it clung to their clothes and hair for weeks. An estimated 200,000 Aztecs perished in the siege, most from starvation and disease. The magnificent city of Tenochtitlan was utterly destroyed, stone by stone, its temples torn down, its palaces looted, its very memory slated for erasure. On its ashes, a new city would rise, Mexico City. The fall of Emperor Montezuma II was not a single man's failure. It was the catastrophic convergence of prophecy, psychology, political brittleness, and biological apocalypse. Montezuma's initial paralysis, born of a worldview that could not comprehend the Spanish as mere men, set the stage. But the final collapse was wrought by steel, alliance, and a pathogen that acted as the silent, most effective conquistador of all. In the dusty archives of Seville and the faded codices of Mexico, the debate rages on, not with swords, but with ink and interpretation. The fall of Montezuma and his empire is not a closed case. It is history's greatest cold case, filled with conflicting testimony and moral shadows. Was Montezuma a tragic visionary? A man whose profound religious belief blinded him to a secular threat? Or was he a weak, indecisive leader whose hesitation doomed his civilization? Spanish chroniclers, like Cortés himself in his carefully crafted letters to King Charles V, painted Montezuma as vacillating and cowardly, willingly surrendering his sovereignty. It was a narrative of legal and divine justification for conquest. But indigenous accounts, like the Florentine Codex compiled decades later by Franciscan friars with Nahua scholars, tell a different story. They depict a sovereign trying to understand an unprecedented crisis through the only lens he had: prophecy. He was not weak, he was logically trapped. His surrender was, in his mind, perhaps an act of cosmic deference. Then there is the question of the massacre at the festival of Toxcatl. Pedro de Alvarado claimed it was a preemptive strike against a confirmed rebellion. But no Aztec source mentions any such planned uprising. Was it a monstrous misunderstanding, a deliberate act of terror to break the city spirit, or simply the action of a ruthless and panicked man? The truth lies buried with the thousands of unarmed nobles slain that day, their story told only by the victors. And what of Montezuma's death? The Spanish account, death by his own people's stone, is almost too perfectly symbolic, absolving them of killing their royal hostage. Aztec sources are adamant. The Spaniards slit his throat before they fled the Noche Triste. Forensic history provides no corpse, only this stark, irreconcilable clash of narratives. His death, like his life, remains a mystery at the heart of the conquest. The greatest moral question, however, hangs over the land like the smoke from the fallen temples. Was this a conquest or a genocide? The Spanish had their recramento, a legal doctrine read aloud in Spanish to uncomprehending natives, demanding submission to church and crown before hostilities could legally begin. It was a fig leaf over naked ambition. The pursuit of golden souls was a devastating combination. But was the intent total annihilation? Cortés needed subjects, not an empty wasteland. The Tlaxcalans and other allies sought the destruction of Aztec power, not the Aztec people. Yet, the outcome was near annihilation. The population of Central Mexico, estimated at 15 to 25 million before 1519, collapsed to barely 2 million within a century. Smallpox, typhus, measles, these were the unseen legions that did the bulk of the killing. Was this biological warfare? Not in intent, but in catastrophic effect. The result was a demographic and cultural collapse so vast it defies comprehension. The fate of the key players offers little poetic justice. Cortés achieved unimaginable wealth and fame, but spent his later years in Spain embroiled in lawsuits, bitterness, and royal disfavor, dying a wealthy but embittered man. He had conquered a world, but could not control his own. Cuauhtémoc, the brave last emperor, was tortured by Cortés to reveal the location of non-existent hidden gold, and later hanged on a dubious charge of conspiracy during an expedition to Honduras. His martyrdom only solidified his legend as Mexico's defiant national hero. Malinche, the enslaved Nahua woman who became Cortés's translator, advisor, and the mother of his child, is perhaps the most contested figure of all. To some, she is the ultimate traitor, the facilitator of the conquest. To others, she was a brilliant survivor navigating an impossible situation, a woman whose diplomacy sometimes spared lives, and without whom the conquest might have been even bloodier. Her name, Malinche, is now a complex Mexican epithet for betrayal, yet her story is one of profound, silenced agency. The physical empire of the Aztecs vanished, but its bones lie beneath modern Mexico City. The Templo Mayor was rediscovered by utility workers in 1978, a spectral heart beating under the concrete. Every few years, the earth yields another relic, a monolith, a trove of offerings, a wall adorned with skulls, reminders that the world of Montezuma is not gone, merely buried. The conquest created a new, painful world, Mestizaje, the mixing of blood and culture, a fusion born from violence and survival. The Spanish language absorbed Nahuatl words, tomate, chocolate, coyote. The Virgin of Guadalupe appeared on the hill sacred to the mother goddess Tenantzin. It was a collapse, but from the ruins, something tenacious and new, yet forever scarred, began to grow. So, we are left not with a simple tale of brave explorers or brutal conquerors, nor of noble savages or bloodthirsty pagans. We are left with a human tragedy of Shakespearean scale, a story of how a civilization, at the height of its artistic, architectural, and imperial power, was unraveled by a handful of men it could not conceptually understand, and by microscopic allies those men did not know they carried. It is the story of how the world, once vast and separate, became painfully, violently connected. The last unsettling truth lies in a simple, chilling fact. When the survivors of Tenochtitlan finally surrendered, when the last Macuahuitl clattered to the blood-soaked ground, the Spanish and their allies moved through the eerie quiet. They searched the palaces, the ruined temples, the abandoned homes. They found storerooms of maize, beans, and squash, now rotten. They found workshops of untouched obsidian and jade. They found everything a great civilization needed to thrive. Everything, that is, except the one thing it could not survive, a future its prophets had never seen coming.